Shalom, my friends. I've had some people asking me questions about marriage and divorce, and I thought I'd put this together for you. I want to start off with those of you who are thinking about marriage, not married yet. Someone, asked me, we shouldn't marry if we're not evenly yoked, right? Yeah. But that's 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 says, "Do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness and lawlessness, and what fellowship has light with darkness?" Now that, that is to be applied with everything, every kind of involvement that you have. But, if you're thinking about marriage, you haven't been married before, you want to be married, it's, everybody tells you it's a big step, and it really is. Well, how do you know? First of all, you don't do anything without prayer, talking to the Father, seeking His guidance, His confirmation. If you want to know whether or not somebody really loves you, you take a look and meditate on 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4 through 7. I'll read it. "Love is patient, is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not boast, is not puffed up, does not behave indecently, does not seek its own, is not provoked, reckons not the evil, does not rejoice over the unrighteousness, but rejoices in truth. It covers all, believes all, expects all, endures all," never fails. But if you're thinking about a particular person, go through these verses, put their name in there. Alan is patient. Alan is kind. Alan doesn't envy. Alan doesn't boast. Alan is not puffed up, like that. Put that person's name in there, and then see what happens to your impressions as you read that. If somebody really loves you, they're going to fit all those little points. And if they don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. Maybe they don't love you. No matter, people can say one thing, but actions speak louder than words and all that. 1 Corinthians again, chapter 7, covers a lot. In fact, pretty much the whole chapter. He's Shaul, that's Paul, and of course, I'm reading from the HalleluYah Scriptures. If you're not familiar with it, check out my links below. It's the most anointed English version ever. It's the most accurate English version ever to be published. Shaul is questioning, is it good for a man not to touch a woman? And he goes on, verse 2, "Because of whoring, let each one have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife what is her due, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another. This is important. Except with agreement for a time to give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again so that Satan does not try you because of your lack of self-control. It's important when you're married that sex be made something sacred, that you exercise self-control. You don't do it haphazardly or any old time. You know, there's a lot of reasons for following what's being instructed here. If you make it something that you can do any old time without any importance attached to it, then it becomes unimportant, and it starts satisfaction starts waning, and the devil will use your lack of self-control to start messing around with your commitment to each other, and it will cause problems. So again, don't deprive one another, except with agreement for a time. Agree, to abstain from time to time, to give yourselves over to fasting and to prayer, time in the Father's Word, and then, coming together again after that agreed period of time so that you're exercising self-control is a powerful tool to apply. Verse 6, and I say this as a concession, not as a command. It's just, wise instruction to follow. It's not a command. Verse 7, for I prefer that all men were even as I myself, without a woman. But each one has his own gift from Elohim, one in this way and another in that. And I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it's good for them if they remain, even as I am, unmarried. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry, for it's better to marry than to burn, than to suffer, than to live in constant conflict. The devil will take that and he'll expand it. Verse 10, and to the married I command, not I, but the Adon. A wife should not separate from a husband. Now, we start looking at, after you're married, the idea of divorce. And divorce is taken very lightly these days. Unfortunately, a wife should not separate from a husband. Verse 11, but if she is indeed separated, let her remain unmarried. Remain that way. Or be restored to favor with her husband. So, if a woman's divorced, and this is a command from Elohim, this is not a suggestion, then she has to stay divorced, or either return to her husband, finding favor from him, or stay single and focus on your relationship with Elohim. Why? I'll expound on that as we go on. And let a husband not send away a wife. And to the rest I say, this is Shaul speaking, not the Adon, not Elohim. If any brother has an unbelieving wife, and she thinks well to live with him, let him not send her away. So if you're married and your spouse is not a believer, pray for them. Don't preach to them. pray for them and ask Elohim to help. And, you know, be a good mate, be a good example. Verse 13, and a woman who has an unbelieving husband, and he thinks well to live with her, let her not send him away. Same thing. For the unbelieving husband has been kadosh in the wife, and the unbelieving wife has been kadosh in the husband. I've said this before. Kodesh means, you know, Kodesh is the Hebrew word for what most people think of as holy. Holy is a pagan word. I don't like to use it. It's Kodesh. And really, you know, when you think of the word holy, you know, where does that take you? You know, candles, stained glass windows. What does it mean? It's good to change your vocabulary up, especially with the Father's original Hebrew. Kodesh is the word that's often replaced with the English pagan word we know as holy. Kodesh means dedicated. Really dedicated to one thing only. The Father is dedicated to us. He wants us to be dedicated to Him. So here where it says the unbelieving husband has been kadosh in the wife, and the unbelieving wife has been kadosh in the husband, they've been dedicated to each other. Otherwise, your children would be unclean. But now they are kodesh. They are clean. They are dedicated. And if the unbelieving one separates, let him separate himself. A brother or sister has not been enslaved in such matters, but Elohim has called us to peace. So, you know, if somebody leaves, fine. If they're an unbeliever and they just go their own way, what are you going to do? But, you know, if it's the husband and the wife just left him, it's okay for him to remarry. If it's a woman and she divorced her husband, she has to remain single. Either she gets resolves things and goes back to him, or she stays single, period. End of story. Verse 16, for how do you know, O wife, whether you shall save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you shall save your wife? That's why, you know, you're married. You made a vow to each other, till death do us part. You stay together. You fight through the troubling times. You don't give up. And if, you know, your spouse is an unbeliever, pray, you know, like I said, you know, don't preach at them, but, you know, be a good example and pray for them and seek the Father's help. And how do you know? They might be saved on your account. And, you know, when you make it through those tough times, you wind up with a relationship that has something of substance to it. Today, people, you know, they just seem to divorce and give up at the first sign of conflict, and then they go find somebody else, and it's the first sign of conflict, they give up there, and they just wind up in a basket of confusion for their lives. You make a commitment in marriage, it should be as you vowed, till death do us part, for better or for worse. You hang in there, you make it work through love. So anyway, you can go on and read the rest of chapter 7. There's lots of good information in there. If you haven't married, you know, consider 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. Does that person really love you? Now, you know, Matthew chapter 5, verse 32, Yeshua says, you know, you shouldn't divorce. But in the case of adultery, then it's okay. Well, you know, in the original language and in the original Hebrew mindset, what's really going on there is, and if you study the word, you know, in greater detail, Old Testament, renewed covenant, and so on, divorce is never okay. with the Father. Never. Ever. But he says, except in the case of adultery. And what he's saying there is like, look, it's never acceptable. End of story. But the Father understands. In the case of adultery, he understands that, you're human, you're weak, you can't take it. It's more than you can bear. So, he okays it. But that does not mean he's okay with it. He's never okay with divorce. Yahweh hates divorce. And then to Luke chapter 16, verse 18. Also you see it in Matthew 5:32. If a woman has been divorced, no man should ever marry a divorced woman. Ever. Period. The only time a woman can marry someone that was not her husband is if her husband dies. A woman's divorced, she is bound to that first husband as long as he lives. She's bound to him. She's under his rule and authority, like it or not. That's the Father's command. That's his way. She's only released from him if he dies. So, in a nutshell, without going into too much detail, there's what the Word has to say about marriage and divorce. If you're not married and you're thinking about it, don't jump. If you can avoid it, avoid it. Because if you can avoid it, you probably should. If you can't avoid it, make sure you're prayerful about it and consider the Father's Word. And then when you commit to it, commit to it. When you make those vows, don't break them. Breaking a vow of any kind creates trouble for you that is immeasurable throughout the rest of your life. Never make a vow unless you have to. And then when you do, stick to it. Because if you don't, boy, the devil will use that big time. And if you are married, consider all the things that I just talked about. Be faithful, be loving, be supportive, be encouraging. Remember how you acted before you got married and you were dating. How much more you went out of your way to please. And readopt that attitude. Try to recreate the mystery in your relationship and the excitement in it. And most of all, remember your vows. Don't ever break them. That's it on marriage and divorce. Shalom, my friends.